Alrighty guys, welcome back, and in this video I want to start talking to you about something called services. Now a service is a process that can run in the background of your app. So it's pretty much a chunk of code that can run and it doesn't interfere with the users, just using the app or anything like that. And also, a service doesn't have an interface. You can't make an activity or any buttons to go along with the service. It's just a chunk of code that runs in the background. So why would you ever want to make a service? Well, say that you had, I don't know, maybe a social network app that was constantly checking for new notifications. Or maybe you had a messenger app that was always checking for new messages. Well, of course, these are just things that run in the background and you don't need to, click a button that say, okay, check for new messages now. Okay, check for new messages now. Or else it would be kind of annoying. So that's what a service is. Another thing that they're really good for is downloading images off a website in the background. So again, now that you got the idea, what I want to do is show you guys how they're created. And what I did is I pulled up that Apple's bacon program that we made earlier, and that's just because I'm going to show you guys that whenever you create a service properly, it's just a chunk of code that runs in the background and it doesn't interfere with the user experience. You can just put a button on the screen or something, just anything that you can interact with to essentially demonstrate that, okay, the service isn't interfering with the user experience at all. So actually we can close out of these. We really don't need those files. We're not going to be editing those at all. So again, I'm going to keep my apples and bacon Java files open just so you guys see what's going on. Now, the first type of service I'm going to show you guys how to create is called an intent service. And in order to create this, go to your main package right here and right click new and add a new Java class. Now I'm just going to name this Bucky's intent service and click OK, and we'll just pretend that this service is for downloading images off the internet. Although all I'm going to do is I'm just going to print out a little bit of text that says like the service is running or something, but we'll pretend that this is for downloading images off of, like, I don't know, maybe we made like an Instagram type app or something like that. Alright, so whenever you make a new intent service, there are a couple rules that you have to follow. The first rule is you need to have a constructor in here, and that's just kind of for housekeeping. And the second rule is you need to have a method called onHandleIntent. Now inside that method is where pretty much whatever you want your service to do, that's where the code goes. So remember those two rules, and let's go ahead and import everything to make it work first. So Android app intent service, because that's pretty much what this class is doing, and Android content intent. There we go, it already knew. Alright, so in order to make this class this intent service, we actually need to, holy caps lock, inherit from intent service. So now once we do that, again, the first thing I said is public. Actually, I wonder if there's an autocomplete for a constructor. There we go. Alright, so here's my constructor right here, and of course the only thing that you have to do is you need to pass the superclass the name of this class, and that's just the rules for Android to make sure it works. And you actually don't even need any of this because we aren't using any parameters, and we can get rid of this as well. Now the only other thing that we need to do is we need to put an override method in, and that is called, if I can find it, it's called onHandleIntent. If you guys see it, let me know. Oh, here it is, onHandleIntent. So again, this is just housekeeping stuff. This is saying that this is indeed an intent service or a service, and in here I'll just write like this is what the service does. So this is pretty much to meet the most important part. So for now, since we don't want this service to actually do anything, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to import android.util.log. And this is just so I can print out a log message right here so we can see that this is actually working. Now, in order to do that, we already did this before, so, nothing new. So private static final string tag. And remember, you set this equal to whatever your package name is. And this is just standard. I'm not just like making this up. You should name it tag, and you should set it equal to whatever your package is. And now, of course, whenever you want to log a message, just call log.i. And the first parameter is that tag, and the second one is what message do you want to output down here. And I would just write something like the service has now started. Alright, so that's all this service is going to do. Of course, like I said, later on you may want to check some database for updates or download images or see if you got any new chat messages in here, but for right now, just print out a message, oh well. So after this, what we need to do is we need to hop over to the manifest, and in our manifest, we need to say, okay, we actually are using this service right now. So if you go right above application and right below activity, because this is, well, it's just where you need to put it. If you throw service, and the name that you put in here is just the name of your class. And where did my manifest go? Alright, so make sure you put dot and the name of your class, and that's it. And this just registers a service with your manifest. In other words, it tells your app, hey, we got this service, so that's that. So pretty sweet. Let me just, okay, messed everything up. Awesome. Alright, so we registered with the manifest, we created a service, looking good, looking good. Now the one last thing that we need to do is we need to actually start this service, because remember I said a service is pretty much some kind of process that runs in the background, but it doesn't just start by default whenever your app starts. You have to kick it off manually. So in order to do that, we can just head over to apples.java, and we'll just throw it right on this onCreate. So whenever this app gets created, it's going to kick off that service. Now in order to do that, intent, I'll just name it intent and set it equal to new intent, and the parameters are of course this, and if I can just copy this, it's pretty much like any other intent actually, come to think of it. Alright, so now we have an intent, which means we intend to launch some kind of class, and that class is this service or this background process right here. Easy weasy. Now anytime we want to start service, you just call start service. What do you want to launch? Well, how about that one right there? Alright, pretty stinking sweet. So now as soon as this app starts, it's going to launch this service. And the one thing I actually forgot to do is set up this log filter, because this is going to print out log messages. But as you guys can see, there are a crap load printing out right here, and this would indeed print them out, but it would print out all these other ones as well. So of course what we want to do is we want to filter out only the ones that we care about. So copy this, hit edit filter configurations, and I'm just going to make a new filter called like Bucky's filter and throw that right in there. Alright, so that's a little bit cleaner. So now let me go over to Apples again and kick this baby off. Alright, so check this out. It says the service has now started. In other words, this service currently right now would be doing something like downloading images off of the internet. But check it out. I'm going to click it. It goes to bacon. Click it. It goes to apples. Essentially, we can have this service running and it doesn't interfere with the user experience. So now you guys are probably wondering, alright, well, you told me in the last tutorial that computers run a list of instructions in a nice, neat order. So how is it that we can be having two different things happen at the same time? Well, you know, in the last tutorial I showed you guys how to manually create a thread, and you can put code in there to run at the same time as your main program or your main thread. Well, whenever you create an intent service, it automatically creates a thread for you. So even though we don't see runnable or thread or anything like that, it does it all for you behind the scenes. So that's a pretty cool aspect of intent services. It automatically takes your service and it kicks it onto another thread, so it doesn't interfere with the user experience at all. So pretty stinking sweet. We now got images downloading, and it doesn't even interfere with any of that. So in the next tutorial, what I'm going to be showing you guys is another type of service. And alright, you know what, I'm going to explain it then because my throat is dying out here. So, well, anyways, I'll see you then. Alright guys, so another way to make a service is just to inherit directly from the service class. And it's a little bit different than an intent service, and by the time you understand everything about services, you're going to learn when to use each one and the benefits of each. But for right now, let me show you guys how to do this. So if you right click your package and select new service, and then just choose regular service, not intent service, then what this is going to do, we'll just keep the default name for now, is it's going to give you a file that again inherits directly from the service class. Now before I show you guys how to make this, let me just go ahead and android util.log, just set up all my log messages stuff. So I'm going to put it right above the constructor, that variable, private static final. Probably should just copy this string tag and set it equal to this. Alright, and we probably should go to our filter and make sure that everything is set up properly. So now we can essentially print out log messages. So the first thing I want to show you guys is this. By default, it gives you two methods, and this is, you always need these methods whenever you're using this type of service, the constructor, and we really don't need to do anything in the constructor right now, so we can just leave it like there, no code necessary. Another thing is it gives you this method right here. Now there's actually another type of service called a bound service, and I'll probably teach that in the next tutorial, but for right now all we can do is we can actually just return null right here, because this tutorial is not going to be a bound service, and what those are and how to use them, not really important right now, because right now I'm just going to show you guys how to create a generic service. Alright, let me adjust right here, and after this constructor, what I want to do is I want to override a few methods. So go to Alt, Insert, Override Methods, and the first thing I want is Onstar Command. Now essentially whenever we start our service, we're going to put the code of what we want a service to do in here. So this is pretty much the meat of it. Inside here is whatever you want your service to do. Now another thing I want to do is I want to inherit onDestroyed. And this is going to be called whenever your service, of course, is destroyed. Easy stuff right there. So I'm just going to print out a log message on destroy so you guys can see when it's getting called. So log.i tag, and I'll just write something like on destroy is method called, something like that. Alright, looking good. So now let's go to Onstar Command, and we can actually just delete all of that. So again, this is when your service starts. So whenever it starts, of course, you want it to do something. Now just to demonstrate a few things, the first thing I'm going to do is just print out when this command is being called, so then in the little log section we can see when it's happening. And another thing that I want to do is this. So again, remember, a service is just a process that runs in the background, and the user doesn't interact with it at all. It doesn't have an interface or anything like that. Now, the proper usage of a service allows for the user to continue using their phone while whatever happens in the background just happens unknown to the user. So what we need to do to make that happen is we need to take whatever code is in our service and stick it inside a new thread. Now the reason that we didn't do that in the last tutorial with the Bucky's intent service is because an intent service, it makes its own thread automatically. That's how Android is set up. However, it doesn't on this type of service inheriting directly from the service class, but we get some other benefits as well, as we'll see later. So of course we already know how to make threads. Runnable R equals new runnable, and sweet. So make sure to throw that in there. Now of course in run is what you want to do. So all I'm going to do for this little example is I'm going to make a loop, and this is going to be real stupid, by the way. Just set I equal to 0, and we'll say like I is less than 5 and I plus plus. So again, this loop is just gonna loop 5. Actually, let's go ahead. Well, it's good enough for right now. So right now I'm just gonna pretty much just wait, just like we did before. And I probably should just go get the code for my other tutorial, but too lazy to do that. So we can recap. So system dot current time millis, and we'll just add 5 seconds to it. So that's 5,000 milliseconds equals 5 seconds. And now we can just make a little while loop. So while the current time is less than the future time, then what do we want to do? Synchronize this. Alright, so we finally get to the good stuff. So all we're going to do is we're going to try to alright, let's just wait. So we're just going to wait like before, and we're going to take that future time and subtract the current time. And why is it giving me an error? And it is because I didn't catch my exceptions. Exception E. Alright, so after this waits, I should probably print out a little log message too, so you guys can see what's going on. So all this log message is going to say is, I don't know, service is doing something. Alright, so this service is pretty dumb. The only thing it's doing is it's waiting for 5 seconds, 5 different times in a row, and it's just going to print out service is doing something. But of course you would want to put some code in here, like downloading images or checking a database for whatever you want to happen. But now that it's stuck on a new thread, it's not going to interfere with whatever else the user wants to do on your app, like changing screens, clicking buttons, playing the game, whatever. So now that we have this background process set up, the only other thing we need to do is kick off this thread. So I'm just going to name mine Bucky's thread, and of course you set it equal to new thread. Holy moly, thread. And what was our object? R. So this R is the code that we want to run inside the thread. So now we just need to start it. So start. And of course, since all of this code is going on the Onstar command, we need, or excuse me, the Onstar method, we need to return something. Now, just return this. If you call service dot start sticky, as you can see, it was the first thing that popped up. There is, I believe it's start sticky and alright, start sticky and start not sticky. So what start sticky means is you don't really need to worry about it that much, but if your service ever gets destroyed by the Android operating system for any reason, then start sticky just means restart the service. And if you call start not sticky, then the service is not going to be restarted if it ever gets destroyed. So again, not really important right now. Just remember to return service start sticky. Now the last thing we actually need to do, one little itty bitty line of code, is on your apples, we need to say, okay, you created a service, but when do you want to start running this service? Well, I'm just gonna put it right here on onCreate because I don't know, I don't want to do anything too fancy. And just like anything else, make a new intent with this, and what was it? Pass in the name of that class where your service is, and as you know, to start a service, you just start service I. So whenever this Apple's activity is going to get created, which we are going to do right now, it's going to start that service, and all this service is going to do. Actually, what I would like to do is go to my logcat. Make sure we're on Bucky's filter. And again, like I was saying, all this service is going to do is wait and print out something. However, it's going to be running in the background, which is really cool. So there you have it. Check it out. Their service is working. Service is doing something. I can click continue to interact with my app, and it doesn't interfere with the user experience at all. Pretty stinking awesome. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you create a service manually from inheriting from the service class. And remember, whenever you do so, you should really stick your code inside a thread, and it's going to create an awesome user experience for your customer. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial I'm going to talk to you guys about something called bound services. Now, the services that we created in the last couple tutorials, they were great and all, but if you guys ever try to have any level of communication between your app and that service, it may have caused some issues. So in this tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you guys about bound services, and it allows us to communicate with the service a little bit better than the old ones. So the first thing I did is I started a brand new project, and I didn't do anything weird. I just chose blank activity. So again, we got one Java file, one design, pretty boring. And what I want this app to do, of course, I need the user to do something, and then it makes some service happen. So all my service is going to do is it's going to get the time. So pretty dumb, but it's a pretty simple example of how this is all going to work. So let me delete this text view right here and instead draw a large one so you guys can see it better. And this, of course, is eventually going to display the time whenever the user clicks a button, and we'll give them this button right here. So just so we can be clear on what's going on, this button they can click, and we'll say like, what's the time? So they click that, and it'll display the time, so we really don't need to change this text at all. However, what I would like to do is change the IDs of these. Alright, so the ID of text view could be Bucky's text, and the button ID could be Bucky's button. And the last thing I want to do is, of course, whenever they do click this, we want something to happen. So we need to go down to the on click, and what can we call this? Let's just call it show time. So again, we're going to have to build this method in a little bit, but eventually they're going to click it, and it's going to call some service, and the service is going to display the time on the screen right there. So pretty sweet. So let's go ahead and make that service now that we got our very basic interface set up. So of course, you guys already know how to do this. If you go down to your main package and right click and choose new service, just the plain one, and we can just keep the default name, why the heck not, and finish it up. So this is what we get by default. Okay, pretty sweet. But now we have to figure out, how do we make this binder thing, whatever the heck that is, how do we make this app the ability to connect with this service? Let me just rearrange this, and I messed everything up. Alright, so there we go. So the first thing I want to do is we need to create a new object, and this object is going to be responsible essentially for connecting whatever the app is called. It's called the client, and the service is just called the service. So we want to bind the client to the service. So that's the technical term. So we need first an object that's going to do this. Now, if you actually, we need to import some stuff first. All right, so import Android.os binder, and of course we need to import all the stuff to make us to give us access to change the time. So that is just java.text.simple date format, import java.util.date, and import java.util.local or locale, whatever. Alright, so now that we got all of our stuff that we're going to use imported, we can first create an object that's going to be the binder object. So again, this is kind of like the bridge that's going to connect your app to your service, or your client to your service. So I'm going to go private final. It's an iBinder object. I'm just going to name mine Bucky's binder, and we're going to set it equal to new my local binder. Now this, as you notice, is going to give us an error because this is a class that we didn't create yet. Now I'm going to mention this right now. The way that you bind a client to a service, it's kind of weird how Android makes you set it up, but I promise by the end of this video you're gonna understand it. However, when I'm trying to talk through it, it's a weird little process, and it kind of involves an extra step that you may think, okay, what's the point of that? And I think it too. It's just the way that Android makes you do it. Alright, so again, this is the object that's going to be responsible for the bridge, the bind between your client and your service. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create this class. So let me show line numbers and give myself a little more space. And we'll create it right at the bottom here. So public class let me just copy that. My local binder extends binder. Right there. So the first rule is whenever you want to bind a client to a service, you need to make an object that extends the binder class. And this says, hey, this class is going to be capable of binding two things together. Now the only thing we want this class to be capable of doing is returning a reference to this. It's pretty much superclass, because whenever we have access to that, we can use all the methods that are in here. So if you go to my service, or whatever you named your service whenever you started, and make a method called get service. Now all this method is going to do, and this is the only method that's going to be in the class, is it's going to return my service this. So again, essentially what it boils down to is whenever we want to bind a client to a service, we need to create a new class that has the ability to bind. Now the only thing this class is going to do is it's going to return a reference to this class, and then we can use this stuff inside here. So pretty simple enough. Again, it's kind of weird that you have to like make something to get inside what you were already just at, but you know, that's how it works. Now the one last thing that we need to do is for this onBind, if I can select everything, what this method is going to do, if you delete all of this, it's just going to return Bucky's binder. Alright, so let's step back and see what's going on. Eventually, this is our client, this is our main activity. It's going to try to bind to this service. Now whenever this activity binds to this service, it goes inside here and it looks for a method called onBind. So this is what you want me to do whenever I'm trying to bind. Well, what instructions are you giving me? Return Bucky's binder. So what Bucky's binder is just an instance of this class right here, and this class gives you access or returns a reference to my service, pretty much allowing you to access anything inside here. So again, we're going to go here, and then we're going to go here, and then here, and then we can access the stuff inside the class. And I know it's stupid, but that's how Android makes it work. And most of the time, people just they just like copy this and paste it, but you know, you're already like one step ahead of everyone else because they really, most people, to be honest, they don't even know how it works. But now we know how it works behind the scenes, and well, we're on our way to becoming a pro Android developer. Now, one other method I'm going to put in this class, of course, this service has to do something, right? I mean, now that we got access and did all the hard work, it's going to be a waste of time if it doesn't do anything. So, remember I said that the main point of this service is just to get the current time. So this is finally the easy part. So public string, I'll just name it get current time. And all this is going to do, and if you ever watch my like normal Java tutorials, you're going to understand all this. So new simple date format, and how do you want to display the time? Well, let's just display it like a clock. The hour in front, then the minutes, then the seconds. You can actually have dates in here like months, years, days, but I just wanted to display time really simple. And I'm going to set mine to the United States because I am in the United States right now. And of course, we need to return it. So return the date format, df, not dtf, and the format is just a date object. So again, we're pretty much just returning a date object, and then we're saying, okay, this is how I want you to format it, with the hours, minutes, and seconds. So again, this is actually the easy part, and eventually whenever we bind to this service, we're going to be able to call get current time, and it's going to give us the current time. So now that we got all the hard stuff out of the way, the next tutorial, finishing everything up, writing the code in here, binding to the service is actually going to be pretty easy to understand. Alright, hostage, so let's finish this up, and the first thing we need to do is import a bunch of stuff. Android.view import, actually let me pause my video and I'm gonna import everything we need to. Alright, so I imported all the stuff we're gonna need for, of course, to reference our interface and also to connect. Now another thing I want to mention is for this last one, in order to be able to access that weird little binary class that we made, make sure that you import your package name right here, and it's just copy this package, whatever it is, and then get this class name and then this class name. So again, package, superclass, binary class. Alright, so now once we do that, we can go ahead and actually start writing some code. First, let me show my line numbers and give myself some space to write. Alright. So the first thing we need is, of course, my service object, and I'm just going to name this Bucky's service, and this is just a reference to this class right here. Now, another thing I want to do is I want to make a variable called isBound. So eventually we're going to be testing, is this client bound to a service? And by default, of course, since we didn't bind it yet, we're just going to start it off as false, and whenever we bind, we're going to set it as true, and that's just so we can check the state of our, what's it called, like bindedness or whatever. And I want to delete all these because I hate these extra comments, and you guys will be able to read all the important code easier. Let me tighten this bad boy up. Alright, so the first rule is whenever we want to bind to a service, we need a service connection class. Now, what this class is going to be responsible for is it's pretty much going to say, okay, when you bind to the service, what do you want to happen? And when you disconnect from it, what do you want to happen? So again, those are the two things that we're going to need to stick in there, but first we need that class. So after all of your methods, give yourself some space in private service connection, and you can name it anything you want. I'm going to name mine Bucky's connection. Again, this is going to be the class that's responsible for binding to some kind of service. So again, set it equal to new service connection, and make sure you add your semicolon right there. And as you see, whenever we created it, it auto completed all of the stuff that we need to have in it. Again, this is really simple. On service connect, it says, what do you want to happen when you try to connect? On service disconnect, okay, whenever you disconnect from the service, what do you want to happen? So I know it's a lot of code, but it's really easy to understand. So whenever we try to connect to a service, all we want to do is we want to reference this binder subclass, and then it pretty much takes it from there. So if we go to my local binder, and then we can just name it binder or something, and we set this equal to my local binder service. Let me finish writing up this one last line of code. Alright, so Bucky service set it equal to binder dot get service, and we'll change that isBound variable to true. Alright, so what did I just write, and what does this all mean? So all this is right here is a reference to my local binder, in other words, that binder class that we wrote last time. Now once we have access to that class, we're going to call the method getService. So we know what that does. And all getService is going to do is it's going to allow us access to this class so we can use all of the cool methods in there. Now that takes care of the connection, and just for housekeeping, checking and stuff, I'm going to set isBound equal to true, because that means, okay, we are now bound to a service. Pretty stinking sweet. Now of course you guys already know what's going to happen here. One line of code. Whenever we disconnect from that service, or get booted out for some reason, we're just gonna change this to false. Easy enough. So now what I want to do is I want to go up to onCreate right here, and whenever we create this activity, that's when we want everything to start. So just like before, we're going to make an intent called I, set it equal to new intent, and alright, so this is our intent. This is what we intend to do. MyService.class. Now check this out. This is where things get a little bit weird. Now instead of just starting the intent, which would be for a normal intent, remember, we want to bind to this. We want to connect to the service. That's the whole point of this tutorial. So if we call a method called bind service, this is a built-in method that allows us to bind to something, and the parameters it takes are your intent, where is it located, the second one is Bucky's connection. So the second parameter it takes, it has to be an object from the service connection class. So that's why we just couldn't like stick this code anywhere else, because this method to bind to service, it requires an object from this specific class. Alright, now one last parameter. Wow, that is definitely ignore security. That didn't sound good. So context, why can I not type today? Bind auto create. So again, you guys already know what this does right here. I already explained it. No need to explain it again. So the last thing that we need to do is you're probably scratching your head and you're like, alright, so this looks good and all, but okay, we're connected to this and then we get to time, but how the heck does it show? Because I know that we had this button right here and it called a method show time. So shouldn't this like app do something useful, like implement that method? So yes, let's just go ahead and do that right now. So again, this is the easy part. Public void. I'm going to start my emulator right now. Alright, alright, alright. Get out of my way. Get out of my way. Thank you. Alright, so public void show time. This is going to be the main method responsible for actually showing the time. And string current time set equal to Bucky's service. Alright, move that out of the way too. So Bucky service get current time, because remember, once we take care of all of our housekeeping stuff, this Bucky service is essentially going to be a reference to this class, and it's going to allow us to access all the methods in here, which, look at that little gem, get current time. So after this, of course, we just need to update that time on the screen. So text view, Bucky's text, and set it equal to text view find view by rd r.id dot Bucky's text. And of course, now that we have a reference to it, we can just call set text, and the current time is going to be current time. Pretty sweet. So there we go, and now let me just wait for my emulator to start up. Actually, I forgot to pass my views along there. Alright, so hopefully, cross your fingers, I'm gonna click this and check it out. It now is connecting or binding to the service, which is returning the time and displaying it on the screen. So whenever I click it, it calls it again. So remember, this end is 6 seconds. Click it again, 11. Pretty stinking awesome. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you create a bound service. In other words, how you can create an activity that can communicate to your service. Technically, it's called a client communicating or binding to your service, but whatever, I don't give a F. Alright, so thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Alrighty guys, welcome back to another video, and just a warning, it is 1:18 a.m. and I was bored, so I decided, you know what, might as well make some videos. So if I'm a little groggy or anything like that, I'm just gonna blame it on that. So yeah. Okay, let's refocus here. In this video, we're gonna be learning about list views, and that is this thing right here. So what is a list view? Well, obviously it's a cool type of widget where you can make a list out of. Alright, boring Bucky. Moving on to the next video. Wait just a second, Haas, because it's more than just a way to make something like a text list, like a grocery list or a list of your favorite movies. What you can also do with the list view, and you guys have used this on every single social networking app, if you ever use like Facebook or Instagram or Google Plus or even Twitter, you know how each of the tweets or each of everyone's posts is in a big, it's either like a feed or a stream or something, and you can just scroll down forever. Each of those items are list items. So here's mine, the New Boston app we're making right now. So here you see one post right here, and of course what you could do on this activity is you can just scroll down forever and ever and ever, and each of these posts is actually a list item. So yes, you can have a very simple list where you just have text, like a grocery list, but you can also have lists of entire posts with pictures, text, embedded pictures, images. Very, very cool. So again, in this tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys the real basics, the structure of how you create a list, and then in the next tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to create custom list items if you ever want to make like a social networking app or a news feed or anything like that. So let's go ahead and get started. What I did already is I created a blank project, just added one blank activity, you know, nothing new. So the first thing I want to do is in my activity main, hop over to the source code view and get rid of that text view because I hate it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a list view in here, and again, remember I said if you want to do it with the design mode, just scroll down and drag one of these bad boys on there. But for the width, I'm just going to hit match parent, and for the height, I'm also going to throw in match parent. And this is just because I want my list to pretty much take up the whole screen, since that's the only thing we're learning in this tutorial. So, you know, I don't need to do anything weird with it. I can just fill it to the size of the parent. And actually, the one other thing I want to do is, let me give myself a little more room here. So make sure your list view selected, and of course we're going to need a way to reference it through our code. So give it an ID. I'm just going to name mine Bucky's Listview and hit enter. Now another thing I want to point out is whenever you add a list view to the screen, you're going to see these default list items. But this is just for pretty much whenever you're designing it, you can see, okay, there's going to be a list in here. Whenever you actually run your app, you're not going to see this, all this text and stuff. This is just for, designing, like I said. So actually, whenever you run your app, we're going to be adding all of the items manually through Java code. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So hop over to your main activity.java, and the first thing I need to do is import a bunch of stuff, but instead of you just watching me do it, I'm going to go ahead and copy it real quick. And I probably should mention this as well. If you want any of the source code, then of course it's all on my forum, so if you don't feel like, watching me or copying me import everything, then you can just go to my forum, grab the code, and paste it in. So that's what I'm going to do right now, so 1 second. Alrighty, so let me paste that in right there and tighten all of this stuff up. Alright, so the first thing I actually want to do is fix all of these errors, and for the action bar activity, this of course means that you want an action bar across the top of your app. I actually just want to inherit from activity because I'm not really worried about that action bar for this tutorial. This tutorial is going to be a very stripped down app just to demonstrate lists, like I said. So therefore we can delete these two override methods. So the only thing we have is onCreate. Essentially, whenever your activity gets created, what do you want to happen? And we're just gonna focus on the list stuff for right now. So after your set content view, which pretty much sets your user's view to whatever this layout is, let's go ahead and add some code under here. So like I said, for the very first tutorial, before we get into making like any cool streams or anything like this, we're just going to make a very basic list of text items. So whenever we want a list of text items, what we can do is we can just make an array, because that's what lists are. And I'm just going to make mine of foods, but you can use like names, items, girls you want to date, whatever. I'm just going to throw like 5 or 6 in here. Bacon, ham. These are also going to be my kids' names whenever I have kids. Baby tuna, candy. Let me add like 2 more. I'm going to have a kid who's a bit of a chunker. His name is going to be Meatball. And I'm also going to have a kid named Potato. He's probably going to look like me. Alright. So again, once you have something that you can create a list of, go ahead to the next line of code, and now we need to understand one important concept. So, as I told you guys, a list can be multiple things. It can be just plain text, like we have right here. It can also be images. It can also be a combination of images and text. So these list items are kind of a weird thing. So what we need to do is we have a little trouble just taking a list of strings in Java and turning them directly into list items. So in order to do that, we need something called an adapter. Now this adapter is going to be responsible for the conversion of Java code to list items that your activity can use. So again, I'm going to show you guys how to make a real basic adapter right now just for text or strings, and that's this. If you go to list adapter, you can name it anything you want, Bucky's adapter, and you need to set this equal to new array adapter. And again, the array adapter object is going to say, okay, so you're trying to convert an array, which we have right here, to list items. So it says, okay, what data is in your array? Well, of course, this is just a string array, and the parameters that go in here are this, and that's just for housekeeping whenever you create a new array adapter. Now, another one is android.r, And I'll explain what this means in just a second. Alright, layout dot, and watch what happens. Whenever I type simple, we get all these weird things that pop up. Simple list item 1, simple list item 2. What the heck does that mean? I'll explain in just a second. And the third parameter is foods. Plural. Alright. So again, we already know that this is the adapter that's going to be responsible for taking an array. That's why it's called array adapter, and converting it into list items. So this is just a keyword for housekeeping whenever you create an object. The next one is, how do you want your list items formatted? Now, of course, by default, it gives you a couple different options. Simple list item means just make it like you would think, the best way I can explain it, if you know, just like an HTML list or a list in like Microsoft Word, just a basic text list, use simple list item 1. So again, I know it's kind of a weird name, but eventually whenever we create something like this, we're not even going to be using that because we're going to be writing our own custom ones, but for now, just memorize it. Now the last one is, of course, okay, you're trying to create an array into a list, so where is your array? Well, of course, ours is foods right there. So now we have a list of strings, and now we have something that can convert it into a list. So of course, what we have to do now is get a reference to this list, and you guys already know how to do that. It's a Listview object in, what was the name of this? Bucky's Listview. And just set this equal to typecast it into a list view and find view by ID r.id dot Bucky's list view. So now we got a reference to this list view. Pretty sweet. And the last line of code we need is this. Take that, no, not that, Bucky's list view, which is on that user interface, and set the adapter. And what you pass in here is, of course, Bucky's adapter. So what do you want to convert to list items? Well, just look at Bucky's adapter, and that'll give you the answers. And it says, okay, it's trying to convert the foods array to list items. So again, in order to get an array of strings to display in a list, what you need is a converter. And this is how you create that right there. So now this is actually good to go. If we just want to go ahead and run this, we can do that. And here we have it, a very basic list. Now, of course, as I said, if you had more than 6 items, like if you had, I don't know, like 100 items or something, then they would go off the screen, but the user can scroll down, kind of like you're scrolling through a news feed or a stream or whatever social network you use. So there it is right now, and as you can see, whenever we click them, absolutely nothing happens. So this is a pretty worthless app. So the next thing you probably want to know how to do is how to make something happen whenever you click one of these list items. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So let me get this out of the way. Alright, so after your last line of code in the onCreate method, go down, and if you go to Bucky's list view, what you can do is you can set on item click listener, and what this is going to do is it's pretty much a listener to see when you click an item in that list. So inside here, this is, you did all this before, new adapter view right here. And instead of that, what we want to do is we want to call a method called onItemClickListener. And inside here, we have to just hold Alt Insert because we want to override onItemClick right here. Alright, so again, what this is doing is it's setting up a listener on your list. So now your list is waiting for the user to click something. And whenever they do, it gives you some information about what item they clicked, the position. Most of this stuff is just behind the scenes, but I'll show you guys how to do something like print out the name of one of these list items, and we'll just print it out as a little toast, that little notification. Alright, so I'm just going to store the name in a string called food and set this equal to string. Actually, if I type this out and talk you guys through from the inside out, it'll probably make a little bit more sense. So value of parent get item at position. Alright, so what this is doing is whenever you tap an item in your list, each of these have a position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, of course. We actually don't even need to worry about that because that position, wherever they tapped, it gets passed along through the variable position, and of course it's an integer. So what we can do is we can just say, okay, get that position, which is some integer, it's really irrelevant to us, and just get the value of it and convert it to a string. So now what that's going to do is it's going to be equal to bacon, ham, tuna, whatever they clicked, and whatever that word is, we're going to store it inside the variable food. So now that food variable is going to be equal to one of these things, and we can just print it out in some kind of toast or something. So if we just go to toast, and of course it's make text, then if you go to main activity dot to this, well, you guys already know how to print out toast messages. Yep, it was named food. How long do we want to print it out for? We'll just print it out, I don't know, long, why not? And after this, in order to show it on the screen, you just show it like that. So again, this is a listener. Whenever they tap, it's going to give us information about the item we tapped. What we are doing is we're just extracting the name or the string value of it, storing it in the variable food, and then showing it as a toast. So let me run it and check it out. We can click meatball, it says meatball. We can click potato, and it says potato, the coolest app ever. So of course, if we just learn lists to make basic text lists, it would be a waste of time because we probably could have done this an easier way. Now the real power comes in learning how to create awesome list items that you can make into a stream or a feed, and you can create the next most popular social network in the world. So in the next tutorial, that's what I'm going to show you guys how to do. Create custom list item views. It's going to be awesome, and I'll see you then. Alrighty guys, so of course this list would be pretty boring and worthless if all we could do is stick text into it. So in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you guys how to create custom list items. In other words, how to create something like if you want to make a Twitter feed or an Instagram or a the Facebook stream. What you can do is you can have these items consist of images, text, any widgets that you want. Actually, you can have inputs in there, whatever. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be making a very simple one. It's just going to have an image and a little bit of text to the right hand side. Say you're looking through like a list of your friends or contacts or something. However, once you understand the basics of how to create custom rows, then you guys are going to understand like how to make any type of layout. So I didn't want to overwhelm you guys. So this is what I want you to do first. Go ahead and grab any image. Let me minimize all this stuff. Alright, go ahead and grab any image from the internet just so you can have some image to play around with. I'm using mine, so if you want to use the same one as I am, then you can just go to my profile, right click, and save as, but make sure that it's at least 100 by 100 pixels, and if you have something that's square, it's probably a little bit easier. But here is my image right here. I named it Chunky. Now go to your Android project that you're working on and just go to it in Windows Explorer and navigate to this. Remember, whenever we want to use images, we need to stick it inside the resource, drawable, and whenever we have images in here, then we can use them in our layouts. So that's what we're going to do. So if you go to, like I said, whatever your project name was, and you go to app, source, main, res, this stands for resources, and I'll talk to you guys through in I don't know, 5 tutorials or something, What all of these mean, you can just pick HDPI for now. Essentially, real quick, you put different images in here depending on, it has to deal with the user's device resolution and making it compatible with a bunch of different devices, but again, not really important. Just didn't want to, skip over it real quick. Just stick your image in drawable HDPI, and now whenever you can actually just close out of this. Whenever you look at your project again, check it out. It automatically updates. You don't need to like click a refresh button or anything like that. Alright, so to create a custom row, this is what we have to do. We actually make a brand new XML file. So if you right click layout and click new, you can just choose layout resource file, and I'm just going to name this file custom underscore row. Now for the root element, it needs some kind of root element, and let's just make this a linear layout and choose OK. So again, what we're going to be doing is, this is kind of like designing a fragment. You pretty much design the template for one individual list item, and then instead of this text right here, it's going to call whatever your design was. So if you have an image right here and some text on the right hand side, each of these rows is going to be image, text, image, text, image, text. So essentially we design one row, and then our code uses it over and over and over again. Pretty sweet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that image on the left hand side right here and the text on the right. So instead of layout, actually, alright, so vertical, as you can see, it kind of confused me because look at this. The icon for layout vertical is left and right here it's up and down. So I was like, what the heck? But you actually want it to be horizontal. And remember, when it's horizontal, that means this right here, so you can lay things left and right of each other instead of up and down. So we need two widgets in this layout right here. The first one is an image view. So if you go down to widgets, image view, then just take this and drag it right on top of your linear layout. So of course right here we can put an image in here, and we might as well take care of this right now. So just for this image, if I go down to source, then what I can do is I can do at drawable / chunky, because remember my image, it was named chunky, and just hit enter, and look at that. So that's how you get an image file to show up right here. Go down to source, put at drawable, that's the folder name, and then the file name without the extension, without the .ping extension. Alright, so that looks pretty good. However, it's kind of, I don't know, big it looks to me right now. So I'm going to go up to layout width, and instead of wrap content, I'm going to change it to something like, I don't know, 50 dp. I don't know, maybe a little bit bigger, maybe like 80 dp. Alright, now I'm going to do the same thing for height. 80 dp. Hit enter, and the last thing I actually want to do is, check this out. You see how it's butted up right up against the edges? I want to give it a little bit of space. So if I go to, oops, I'm on a wrong thing. Alright, so if I go to layout margin and all, what you can do is you can give margins individually, like I only want the left margin, I only want the top. But I actually just want to add a little bit of padding around all 4 borders, so I'm just going to give it like a 5 dp margin, and as you can see, what it does is it just adds a little bit of padding around every single side, and I don't know, I just think it looks a little better. So now that we got the image taken care of, what we need to do now is we're just going to add a text view, and I might as well just add a large text. So large text, drop it on linear layout again, and it's automatically going to place it to the right since you have your linear layout set to horizontal. And we can just leave this text whatever it is by default, because again, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating these dynamically through Java, but for right now Okay, those both look good. I also want to change the padding on this. So for the layout margin, make sure you have your text view selected. What was this one? 5dp, might as well set it the same. 5dp. Alright, looking good. And what else? I mean, it looks pretty good to me. Alright. So again, for this tutorial, if this was a social network or something, we would want to change each of these images dynamically, but for right now, since we only have the string, I'm just going to be showing you guys how to change the text for every single row. And then once you understand how to change the text, you're going to understand how to change everything. You know, no use having like 5 different columns and then just typing the same code over and over again. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get an ID to this text view, because of course we need a way to reference it. So select your text view, go down to ID, and I'm going to name this Bucky's text and hit enter. Alright, so pretty sweet. This, of course, is the design for one individual row. So eventually, every one of these rows or list items is going to have an image icon and a bit of text to the right of it. So how the heck do we do that?